Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Delmar Chabad Center, and today we have a very special guest with us, Mr. Bob Gumson. He is the coordinator of the coalition from the Disabilities and Judaism in the Capital District. Bob, welcome to the Jewish View.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here today,
All right.
Rabbi, and solve a lot of the problems for themselves. So we initially put in for a grant with the United Jewish Federation to try to hold a big conference workshop, and that was what gave me the original idea that in order to pull that off, we needed a coalition and we needed to bring groups together. And we've had, so far since October, when we started officially this coalition on disability and Judaism in the Capital District spanning Saratoga, Troy, Schenectady, and Albany, we've had about 40 different people involved from a range of our community infrastructure, I guess as I would call it.
How many people would you say are Jewish and have disabilities in the Capital District?
Well, in any given situation, generally we consider about 15% of all the population have disabilities as a whole.
Really? That much? That's a big...
And we're ranging, when we say disabled, we're meaning disabilities that involve physical disabilities, sensory disabilities, disabilities that affect thinking or cognitive ones, and mental health disabilities, learning disabilities. So when you include all of those, it could be a considerable number. The U.S. as a whole claims somewhere in the range of 50 million Americans with disabilities.
Really? That many?
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't think that amount at all.
Yeah.
Are you talking about mainly senior citizens? Because of course senior citizens obviously are more prone to getting old and feeble, of course.
Mm-hmm. Well, the seniors are a big concern for many reasons. One is we want to find ways of keeping them in their homes and with us, and not sending them off to institutions and places where the care would not be as comfortable, and where they'd be separated from the ones that they know and they love in their community. But so yes, senior citizens is a concern of this coalition, and eventually we're going to tackle a number of different issues after we raise them all and get them out on the table. But yes, seniors, there's a lot of seniors that are become shut-ins, a lot of seniors that have trouble with transportation because their vision or physical abilities no longer allow them to drive or even walk to places they were familiar with. So there's a lot of need for transportation and networking to get people rides, to maybe bring people meals, to spend time with people. An interesting fact I picked up along the way from a lot of people that I've started to get to know on the coalition is that 80% of the readership of our Jewish newspaper in the area, the Jewish World, are 52 years or older. And it would tell me, I went to try to get a hold of the Jewish World in a format that I could read it in, being blind, and we are talking with them about ways of doing that, but it isn't on tape, and we're working on ways of making it maybe available on disc or something. But I would think seniors, for instance, who wanted to stay connected to what's happening in the community Jewishly, may not have any way unless it gets read to them, or unless it gets put on tape and they can pop it into a tape machine to read the Jewish World, or a lot of other books that would be available, materials to keep abreast of what's going on.
All right, that's excellent. So that we have one goal of your coalition. What are other goals that you would like to see where Judaism and disabilities fit in, where the Jewish community could help the people with disabilities?
Well, a big one that continues to surface all the time is in the whole realm of Jewish education, whether it be after-school Hebrew school programs or the day schools in our area. They've struggled very, very much, admittedly so. The representatives that we talk with have had a hard time keeping kids with learning disabilities, with a variety of different physical disabilities, but mainly children that have different learning or behavior problems. And we lose a lot of families, we lose other siblings who don't have those disabilities. because families choose to get the services and needs addressed outside of our community from public schools and so on, we need to find a way of committing more of our resources. Maybe it could be by raising priorities that United Jewish Federation has to developing resources to support our Jewish education, maybe through itinerant teachers, maybe through tutorial programs, remedial help, maybe by having special ed teachers in certain large school programs. And I think this coalition, if we do take off and get somewhere down the road, we can also be supportive of some of the fundraising and consciousness raising to get some additional funds towards special needs in Jewish education. That's a big one. We hear that all the time. There have been parents that have joined us who talk about their children, when many of whom are now young adults, when their children were looking for places to get bar mitzvah lessons, to go to Hebrew school and so on. The schools didn't have a clue on how to work with them or help them. And I even think back to me when I was losing my sight as a kid. I grew up in Brooklyn, and I was the first born grandchild, and my grandfather was a very, very observant religious man, and he wanted very much to see his grandson as a blind person, no matter what, bar mitzvahed. And we went to the local synagogue looking for assistance in Hebrew school, and they didn't know how to teach me. And it was a short time after I started that they said they kind of like threw up their hands. They didn't know what to do. There wasn't anyone to give them any ideas or thoughts on it, any consultation. And my grandfather ended up teaching me how to read, how to chant my Haftorah from tapes and from the transliteration of the Hebrew. I've since come to know that there were a lot of other choices back then, and one thing I did for myself as an adult was I made up my own little symbols in Braille for trope. And I learned with a teacher from my synagogue how to chant Haftorah, at least. And when I turned 40 a couple of years ago, I redid my Haftorah for my 40th birthday and read it with my fingers this time, the way in Hebrew, Braille, which there is also a Hebrew Braille, and did it the way it was meant to be done back then and could have been done. It was just that nobody knew. And I'm sure we'll come across similar things, whether it be for blind kids, learning disabled kids, kids with hearing impairments, and so on and so forth.
Right, it's very good. So we are working, there are things in the Jewish community that could be helping the people that are with disabled, specifically with Jewish needs. Now, actually, I know you work with the state with disabled. I think that's the same thing with me. I think what I do for a living is what I love most, is what I do is help Jewish people and teach about Judaism. I think the same thing with yourself. So the same thing you do for a living is, of course, helping people with disabilities. Tell me what your function with the state is in helping disabled. Of course, not in the state is nothing specifically to do with the Jewish people.
No.
It's just with everybody, but still.
It is with everybody, and wherever possible, I try very hard, person to person, just out of my own professional contacts, to connect with my Jewish colleagues and peers and talk in terms of our Jewishness. But aside from that and beyond that, professionally, I work for the New York State Education Department, and the New York State Education Department has one very large agency in it that's probably the one with the largest name in state government. It's the Office of Vocational and Educational Services for Individuals with Disabilities. And I work for that department. It's VESID is its acronym. And we have a network of programs and services that span the lifespan from earliest childhood to adult years, and there are a variety of support services and programs to help people with disabilities get employed and live independently. I manage what's called the New York State Independent Living Program. And even though we use the terms independent living, and it conjures up the thoughts for people of community residence and homes and stuff, independent living in the disability community is a philosophy. It's a philosophy where we believe that people with disabilities have the solutions themselves. They are the best resources, and we believe in a peer model, and our programs are all run and managed, and often the boards of directors by law are majority people with disabilities. So we kind of take control of our own lives, our own destinies, and the goal of our programs is to involve people with disabilities in the communities at every level, whether it be in areas of housing, education, the business community, whether it be all aspects of social and recreational, and yes, you know, of course, the spirituality and worship and all that in any way people choose, but to get them involved in solving the problems so that they can be part of their communities fully. And we don't have any places where people live. We expect people with disabilities to live in the community as neighbors, ride the same buses, go to the same schools. We believe in full integration of people with disabilities into everyday life, no matter what the disability is, at whatever level the person is capable of managing their own lives, making decisions, and taking advantage of choices that they have. We have 35 programs that are nonprofits that are run like this all around New York State, and I manage the program with all these nonprofits. They're all independent nonprofits. They all conform to a certain philosophy and way of operating, but they're located from Buffalo to Long Island and from Jamestown to Messina and New York City. What makes them all similar is that they're all run by people with disabilities, they're governed by people with disabilities, they do not have any residences of their own, and they provide advocacy and resources for people to live independently. And they help people with all disabilities, and the families, and they work with the business community.
It's good that you get to work on the job, exactly what you understand this to be the most important job over here. I mean, it's an important thing. Did you find a resistance in the Jewish community? I mean, I had a person who dealt, well, there were Jewish family services specifically, and they were dealing with, we had them on the Jewish View here, and with the alcoholism and drug abuse. And they say a little bit that there's a, well, I don't know, maybe a resistance, but a reluctance is maybe to admit to the problem of Jewish problems with, well, alcoholism and drug abuse is obviously, more shameful than obviously that person with a regular disability. But just that I'm saying that, well, they don't want to deal, they want to deal with the mainstream problems, and surely there's enough mainstream problems. There's intermarriage and assimilation, which of course the Jewish community constantly dealing with. I mean, mainstream goes across all boundaries for everybody, and specifically saying, well, Jewish people have disabilities. I mean, they said it with the person with drugs and alcoholism with Jewish people. They'll, I think, a little under, shoving it out under the carpet. Do you feel that anywhere in the Jewish community, or people are open-handed saying, okay, finally someone's doing something, a problem that we know about? Or maybe they're just ignorant of that there's even a problem. I mean, I have to admit my ignorance. I never would have said that number of percentage of people have disabilities.
Mm-hmm. It's you find in our community, just as you do in others, that people, families, and individuals, they deal with disability in many different levels. I've seen in our own Jewish community, I've seen some families with some children with significant disabilities, and they have created an incredibly warm and loving and inclusive and highly, I think, challenging place for the kids to live with their siblings and moms and dads. And I think the expectations are there for them to live quote-unquote normal lives to their best of their abilities. In other situations, I think you'd find where there is a lot of shame, there is a lot of guilt. People don't necessarily like to ask for help when they need it. I mean, I can tell you, personally, living in a household and being married and having 3 young children, and only 3, and I see families with so many, that's hard to imagine. But when we go somewhere and I need a little time for somebody to read something to me, or I need a little orientation to figure out my way around and stuff. Just by having a disability that my family's very familiar with, it can throw things completely out of proportion. I mean, we have a lot of stresses on us as a family, because I don't drive, for instance. Just a for instance of that's a huge dilemma for us. And take all the other families with all the other variety of disabilities you can have, and they do too. They really do. They may not want to talk about it, they may not want to share it, they may not want to burden other people, but we all need to be, we're all interdependent, whether we have disabilities or not. I guess we need to be conscious of what other people are dealing with. I hear families sometimes, Jewish or not, that have children with severe physical needs, and it's hard to get them in and out of a car or in a wheelchair or what have you. And so over time they may start choosing to leave them home, and they don't get to go with their brothers and sisters to parks, to maybe even to synagogue, maybe even to a whole range of other things. And I guess we all need to kind of work together to make it happen. I find tremendous help when I ask for it, and I overcome the first thing, which is, you know, the kind of getting over the issues that it's only my problem. It isn't. It's everybody's to get together, but and help each other. But when I ask for assistance, I almost always get it. People are very forthcoming. And then it's the weighing back in your mind sometimes too with how much is too much to ask people for help, and when do you turn it off, and how do you know when you're, you know, asking somebody to go beyond their own willingness to, you know, comfort levels with helping out. There's a lot of it. So just in general, we all have that to face in our community. We need to talk about it. You need to have people with disabilities who experience this regularly to talk about it too, because I don't think people are otherwise necessarily going to bring it up and start sharing that kind of the dynamics that go on when you are living with people with disabilities in your life.
Yeah, I know. I think that's important because people, it's like a double think that people think, well, you don't want, you know, you don't want to help me, and therefore, you know, ashamed, and therefore I won't say anything out. I think if they're more like, I don't know, proud's not the word, but just like you said, open, and just saying, you know, this is what I am, and let's, you know, try to work on it and deal with it. I think that would be the best thing. I mean, again, through, you know, of course, my job is to deal with people throughout the community. And, you know, like you say, I think you run the gamut a little bit. Some people are open, like yourself, well, here I am, and I'm out, and I want to get the word out. I invited you to tell your, you know, obviously you're a coordinator of the coalition, so obviously you're organizer. And I just want, you know, I says, well, let's get the word out, and a Jewish View here on TV, sure, right away, just to publicize and what needs to be told. And other people, like you say, there's a very much reluctance and a shame. And I think just that idea that, you know, you could be Jewish and disabled, and you're part of the Jewish community like anybody else is, and you are what you are, and you go on from there. Yep. And I think that's an important idea there. That I don't know if it's more or less in the Jewish community, like I said, with drugs and alcohol, is maybe people are more ashamed than that. I mean, deal with all kinds. I mean, people, deaths in family because of AIDS, for example, and deathly ashamed. I dealt with people in prison. They says, Rabbi, I swear you have to promise me you'll never tell to anybody in the community when you visit my son in prison that they're in prison. But, you know, of course, that maybe is shameful to be in prison. On the other hand, nothing to be proud of, right. You know, and stuff like that. And maybe a little, you know, maybe alcoholism and a little bit drugs because it's their own choice. But of course, other ways, people you deal with is nothing of their free choice. So there's surely nothing to be stigmatized. Even if they have it, I mean, they are what they are. You know, let's try to deal with it, be out in the open. Right. And you can deal with it. Surely, in your case, all the disabilities that you're talking about are surely nobody's fault. And, you know, and then there's surely nothing to be ashamed of.
We do also, by the way, we do consider the struggles that people have with addictions and substance abuse. We do consider those to be disabilities as well, and we would include people who are substance abusers among all other people with disabilities. And you are right that that whole area of alcohol and other drug abuse is a big often very touchy subject for the Jewish community, because Jewish people are just not known to be, to struggle with alcoholism and other drug abuse, but we do. I know we do. I know it from my experience in the field. I worked very closely too in past jobs with alcohol and drug treatment programs, and also in bringing this to home and relating it to the coalition work to some extent, is that there's another whole arena of services and treatment and recovery and prevention from those substance abuses, where disability is also poses a dilemma, because many of the programs that are out there that do treatment aren't accessible. Their buildings aren't. They use very deep concepts, 12-step models and concepts of spirituality that sometimes don't reach everybody at the same level cognitively, connecting to the 12-step models, and and then also for people with disabilities, there's tremendous peer pressure and peer struggles, and sometimes studies have been done to show sometimes the only place where a disabled person feels normal is in a bar room, drunk with other people, because they get accepted at a different level, where there's so many attitudes about disability that people have that exclude them from their lives. It's just a whole other interesting set of things when you bring up that whole topic of alcohol and drug abuse, because I've studied that and worked in that a lot too.
Yeah, it's interesting. Well, it's important that things could be done over here. But what would you say? Would you say, and people have told me this in past, that just the acceptance is like it's half the cure in a certain sense, because certain things, of course, you can't help. But on the other hand, like people with, like you said, emotional problems also, just that acceptance is so important to people that it almost overcomes their problems. I mean, not totally, yeah. I'm not saying totally, but just that, like you say, residential. Well, of course, people know in Chabad House, and people know watching the Jewish View, maybe this is their first few times, or they've known from past, we talk about Chabad, the outreach program. And like I said, we do accept every Jewish person, no matter who they are and what they are. No membership dues, you don't have to worry about that. And like we say, we counsel anybody if people ask for help, or their family. And again, it runs the gamut from the richest and the biggest people in the state, or to whatever people in prisons, so to speak, mm-hmm. and real problems. We accept them. And that's important for us. And people have told me, says, well, what you're doing really is really the best thing you can really do about certain situations, is just accepting people and helping them, and welcoming them into, so to speak, into a Jewish community, which of course every Jewish person is part of a community, but mm-hmm. they may not feel part of the Jewish community. A lot of people feel really pushed off, and in a lot of different senses, and in a lot of different ways. Sometimes Jewishly, they're intermarried, so they feel they have nothing more to do with the Jewish community, or mm-hmm. something like you say with disabilities, no one wants me, or I don't have money, and I don't want to go begging for membership dues, so therefore I will not go to synagogue.
Mm-hmm.
In these cases, mm-hmm. but just almost like you're saying, a helping hand, it seems, is the major cure for just a lot of problems.
Yeah, you're describing something that I can relate. It relates directly to the whole idea of people with disabilities helping other people with disabilities. It's kind of what you're saying. What Chabad does is unconditional. Basically, you're referring to you're meeting people on their terms for who they are, and you unconditionally providing them supports and help to grow and be and get to wherever they want to go. And hopefully through that relationship, and we would call it the peer, in the disability directly, my field, we'd call it the peer model. With that relationship, you empower people, and that's a lot of what this is about, and what hopefully the work of the coalition could do, to get families meeting other families with disabled kids, getting disabled adults to meet other disabled adults, and I kind of believe, I mean, some people say to us, our building isn't accessible and we've never had anybody request to come in here. Why should we spend all this money on making it accessible? And I believe that you build it and they will come. We're lacking some things here in the Capital District that I think would be very helpful. I hear concerns of the deaf community, for instance, that there is nowhere for a deaf, this is totally deaf, American Sign Language speaking deaf person to go to worship. There is no place for a deaf Jewish person really to go and be able to connect to a service. And I know that there are other deaf people out there. If we find a way to make a service interpreted, for instance, I'll bet we'll find others than the one or two we might be able to point to today. Bill, you know, they'll come.
I know, that's I know. Like you say, I've met a number of people throughout all my years, and just like turned off, they just feel the Jewish community is not dealing with their specific problems or issues that they need dealt with. And there may be a few like deaf people. It just tips in mind. A number of years ago, someone just said, you know, I have nothing there, you know, for in the Jewish community. No one's, you know, dealing with our issues. And like I say, and these people become lost to the Jewish community, and every Jewish person is important. You know, but we have about a minute and a half left. Just want to maybe just to sum up and tell people if they interested. I mean, you don't have to have a disability to be part of the coalition, because I showed up, even though
not at all. Everyone is
something
welcome.
A little wrong with everybody. Someone just says no one's perfect, but you know, you don't have to have outward disability. So why don't you say and give an invitation to everybody?
We'd love to invite everybody. We hold monthly meetings in general, usually at different synagogues and other places. Our next one is this Thursday at Temple Gates of Heaven, and probably in May on the second Thursday of the month we try to run them. We might be at Beth Tefillah Synagogue in Troy. We announce it in the Jewish world. My number is 877-7955 up in Clifton Park, and anyone could call me for more information. And we'd be glad to have you. We're looking to meet a lot of needs. We're looking to develop a lot of resources. We're looking to develop a homepage on the internet. We're looking to do a whole bunch of different things where people can connect to resources and information that will help them.
All right, Bob. Thank you very much for your education to the community of what can be done and what, you know, if people want to volunteer, should be done. And also, Doug didn't participate too much over here, but guys are over here. Welcome. You know, he's part of the show over here. Oh, he's getting excited. I called his name.
He's a quiet, contributing member.
That's it. Well, he's a nice dog.
Low voice.
All right, but thank you very much, and hopefully people will check in with you and be helpful and get together to help this part of the Jewish community. Thank you very much.
Thank you.